Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Lily White Lab. Today, I'm finally going to be touching on Mauricio Pochettino. I've put this off for a long time. I've had requests over and over again. But now we are in a space without a manager. Um, and I thought I can't really hold off anymore of talking about him. So I think the sort of best route that I had in terms of trying to find out how Pochettino kind of stacks up in the modern day is speaking to a Chelsea fan, because I think that is the best example of him in the Premier League most recently. So I have my friend Tom, TBLFC, who I've had on the channel before, but welcome back, Tom.
I hope you're enjoying your freedom.
Oh, yeah, man. It's a relief of just like not having to spam videos on low knees, and I can actually talk about the video, the team, sorry. So yeah, I think obviously Pochettino is a massive kind of emotional pull to Pochettino within the fan base. It's always been kind of on people's minds about when will he return. I think when he joined Chelsea, it clouded that for a lot of people, including me. I'm not as like hell-bent on him coming back, but I think he's a good option. So it's definitely one worth exploring. I think it's a safe option for the owners to get the fan base kind of all together. But I have some concerns. So I want to kind of pick your brains and see what kind of his time at Chelsea was like. First, we're going to talk more generally, and then we're going to talk more tactically. Before I do that, please do make sure you subscribe, guys. Please do like the video, share it, and all that stuff. But Tom, if you just take me through kind of Pochettino's tenure at Chelsea, really, just on a more like general overall basis.
Yeah, so we had Pochettino for one season, which was 23-24. The context that probably needs to be provided was that this was the season after we finished 12th in the league. We'd made a lot of signings. I think Cole Palmer and Nicholas Jackson had come in. The aim of the season was to just get back into Europe in some capacity. It wasn't getting the Champions League. It was Clear Lake's second full season owning the football club. And I think the first thing to touch on really is that he did achieve his goals by the end of the season. Even though he left, that it seemed like it was a little bit more nuanced, the reasons why he left. It was more about, alignment with his employers, and he didn't really get on with them. It just didn't feel like it was tenable come the end of the season, even though from a football perspective, Chelsea got what they wanted, which was they finished sixth in the league. They got back in a European competition. So yeah, it was. I think the main positives from it was that the players really liked him. Chelsea were quite fun to watch, and it was his time will probably be looked back on within the club as important for Chelsea to recover from like a nightmare season the year before. The season before was like the worst season
Who
in
did
my
he
life.
inherit the job? Like, who had the job before?
So the season before was when we sacked Tuchel in September. Potter came in
And then
until like
Lampard.
February. So what happened was Potter got a 5-year contract. We were terrible under Potter, and he was gone within 6 months. And then Lampard came in as an interim, and we were still pretty bad when Lampard came in. So then what happened was Poch came in, and they only gave him a 2-year contract. So a lot of questions were raised about the confidence of him long term. But as it turns out, it kind of became a bit of a bridge towards what obviously became Enzo Maresca and now Liam Rosenior. So, I think internally they'll look back on it as, I think, an appointment that did well in that season. I think the main downfalls were that he had a difference with the model long term that Chelsea had. Chelsea's sort of youth-based transfer model, they wanted more of like a tactic coach, I like to call it, a guy who's got a huge attention to detail on the training pitch, on the patterns of play, the structure of the team and training. Whereas Pochettino seems very much more like a man manager that focuses a lot on his teams physically competing with teams in games. And that also became a bit of a sticking point whereby I think in total our players missed like 2,000 days of football through injury, and a lot of people felt like that was his training methods had caused a lot of injuries that we had that season. So all in all, it was pretty. I think the problem with him is it's kind of like similar to what you feel about him now, where like his time at Chelsea soured the emotional connection he had with Spurs fans, whereas I think he was always fighting a losing battle a lot of the time. As soon as he had a bad result or had a bad run of games, people would go to, oh, he's just a Spurs guy, he's a Spurs man, all that stuff. So yeah, in total, I think it was an important season. I think he did some good, but ultimately, I think it was never ever going to be a long-term thing. Yeah, I think his sort of status as a winner in waiting that he was when he was I think when he left you has kind of passed him a little bit, in my
Yeah.
opinion. I think he's like with how tactical the game is now, how good teams low down the Premier League are. I don't really think he's going to take Tottenham anywhere special, but I think I think the plus is that like when we hired him, we were in a very similar situation to what you are right now. We just finished really far down the league, and we probably just needed someone to come in to love the players and to get them playing good football. And he'd done that for that season, and we were able to kick on from it. So yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a very good point. I think I've always thought that Pochettino is more of a league manager than a cup manager. I think he's someone that instills like a common goal and a common ground for the whole club to get behind. He's very good at like aligning everybody in the same direction. Because he is a likable guy. I think he develops young players really well. He develops like really nice relationships within the club. And I think all that kind of common belief really works in a league campaign where you're like, it's just week in, week out. I think where he comes unstuck at times is tactically. I remember, I think we were really good. We had a really good consistency under Pochettino. We had a really good like game model that kind of just worked. We blew teams out the water constantly. But in big moments, he can be outsmarted, I think. I remember Allegri just like played him off the park in terms of tactically. I think we were all over Juventus. I think it was the round of 16 or quarterfinal Champions League, and created so many chances. And then suddenly Allegri, I think, switched from a back four to a back three, and like we just completely lost control. And it was like such a key example of where his shortcomings came. But I mean, overall, it was obviously a great tenure. I think the injury stuff is really interesting because Spurs know all too well how, I mean, our squad has been decimated by injuries for 2 years now, and it's only getting worse. And this comes back to the point where recruitment is always the key. You have to recruit well, and Pochettino as well. I think, like you said, he wasn't someone who was going to just be a yes man under the Clear Lake model. And I think I don't quite like the fact that he gets quite involved in those things. Because I don't really rate his player ID in terms of what's been rumored and the kind of players that he's turned down, the players that he's signed. So yeah, that's another kind of negative, that I think he is more of a manager. And in my eyes, the most successful modern setups are having coaches and a really good structure above to recruit well. Although that is sometimes a bit like dreamlike thinking, because I don't think it never really aligns like that. But yeah, if you kind of take me through the key pros and cons of his time, just broadly, and then we'll get on to the tactics board, and you can like speak in more detail about how he's set up and the pros and cons of that.
For sure, yeah. So as I sort of touched on, I think his downfalls came in the Clear Lake wanted, if you look at Enzo Maresca and now Liam Rossini, they're very highly detailed in their tactical approach. They're very modern coaches. They were young. And Clear Lake wanted someone that they could grow with in that way, someone that was okay with not having a lot of say in transfers. And that's quite a controversial topic in general, because I think it was ultimately the reason Enzo Maresca left, is he felt like he'd earned more power in that regard in his first season.
Which I'm not against either. I quite like the idea that if a manager earns the trust, they get a little bit more say when you have like Arteta earned that, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Like Arteta and Guardiola are the prime examples of like, they're incredible tactically, but they've earned the right to be the epicenter of their football clubs. And when someone like Enzo Maresca comes in, that he wanted that once he'd got there. But Pochettino, it kind of felt like he wanted to be that from the off, and it doesn't feel like it just suits him as a coach. So it never really felt like it was going to be a long-term thing, especially considering it was a 2-year contract. But one of the pros was, and I think Tottenham fans could take something from this, was he platformed the attacking players really well in terms of Cole Palmer especially. Cole Palmer had 40 goals and assists in 45 games. He scored or assisted every 90 minutes for us in that season. It's like one of the best seasons I've seen a Chelsea player have in my life. Like he was incredible.
That was his first season, right?
Yeah, when he just joined, and he was playing off the right. And we'll go into it tactically a little bit deeper, like in terms of the setup, but that came at a cost in the sense that Chelsea were quite literally just a basketball team in that season. We were 5th in goals scored in the league and 11th in goals conceded. So we conceded more goals than Everton, Palace, Fulham, and Brighton that season. We conceded 64 goals in the league, and we had a lot of action in both boxes. And I think you probably remember when we beat you 4-3 at your stadium.
Yes.
You know, you had 9 men and you still managed to score 2 against us.
Yeah.
We drew 4-4 with City. And then I think his downfall within the fan base came in the second half of the season, where we lost 5-0 at the Emirates, 4-1 at Anfield, and we lost the League Cup final in extra time when Klopp was kind of taking the piss and throwing on all of his kids, and Van Dijk scored that header. And I think those 3 results in the second half of the season kind of said he's a bit of a dead man at this point. Like if he doesn't leave before the end of the season, he's gone. And that was, I think, the main theme with Chelsea, is that they were just this team that would just allow shots in their own half, but they had Cole Palmer and Nicholas Jackson that would just had one of the best attacking partnerships in the league that season. So if you're talking about, you know, where Spurs are right now in terms of where are you in the league? You probably don't even want to repeat it, but you are where you are in the league. You just feel like you need some vibes. And we were a lot of fun in that season, a lot of the time. I think ultimately it was completely unsustainable. But bringing someone in that knows the club, that the players will really like, I think there's a lot of pros to that. But as you said, the injury list was long. A lot of people felt like that was because he was overworking players in training,
which he has always done. I'm pretty sure. Like that was
because he's like a bleep test guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like he just wants them running all the time.
Yeah, and that's his game model. His game model is ultra aggressive. He's a Bielsa disciple. He's someone who's built his whole game model around pressing. Really, I mean, a lot of his out of possession work is carries a lot of his in possession work, right? And I think one thing that really helps Pochettino is that he's a very good developer of talent. So he doesn't necessarily need to be amazing tactically, because he's really good at getting the best out of players. And if you have quality around, he will make a good team. I think where a few different things. I think where the Premier League is so competitive now, talent is everywhere. You don't get much talent advantage, except if you're like City. And even then, like you know, there's teams at the bottom half team, there's players at the bottom half teams that would walk into a lot of Champions League level teams now. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is like Pochettino's ideal game model. When we were at our best, we'd suffocate teams. We would like literally, they wouldn't leave their half. They wouldn't be able to get out their half. Constantly, we just recycle attacks. We just press them. They'd go long or whatever. We'd regain it. We'd take the ball off them. We'd maybe lose it, but as soon as we lose it, we win it back. It was just like constant pressure. And that was like, rather than like meticulously opening teams up, it was just pure suffocation. And I worry about that in the Premier League right now. I can't see that. Even Klopp realized that he had to, because that was kind of Liverpool's way of winning games as well under Klopp initially. He kind of reduced that to a point. And Liverpool had to go out and get big world-class players like Thiago to come in to be able to control things. So I just can't see Poch's like ideal game model being really, really successful, like you said. at the moment and where the Premier League's at. I think the other thing to say is like I agree. I think the vibes and stuff would be really good in terms of getting us out of where we're at. The issue is with that is there's too much of an emotion in my eyes, too much of an emotional connection where once those vibes kind of run out potentially, or not run out, or like he does his initial work and we start struggling, the fan base is going to be really split again. People are going to be wanting him out. People are going to be really loyal to him because he's already got that loyalty. People will start talking about the Chelsea stint, and I just think it will cause so much division, and I don't see it as something that will work long term, which will unite the fan base. But let's talk about him tactically, because I want to get more into what I was talking about with the style of play. And you can kind of talk about what he did at Chelsea, and maybe I'll talk about how that might look at Spurs.
Okay, so early on in that season, one of the main things that people noticed really quickly was that Levi Colwill was playing left back. He'd just returned from Brighton on loan, where he was really good at centre back before Graham Potter and then De Zerbi's Brighton. And it seemed like Poch kind of wanted to use Colwill's passing ability, but maybe didn't trust him as a centre back yet, because at this point he was 19, 20 years old.
Yeah.
And a lot of Chelsea fans didn't really enjoy it at first. And it just became a stick to beat him with a lot of the time. And one of those eyesore, when you get like a certain piece of, like a certain setup that a manager uses, or a player's in a certain position, and it just looks out of place.
Yes.
There might not be anything like catastrophically wrong with it.
It just looks
people
wrong.
Just latch onto it online and just go, why? Like this guy's playing Colwill left back. Why are we employing a manager who's playing Colwill left back? And then I think a lot of that was to do with the fact that, and this goes into the one thing I do want to say, is that he understands the strengths of players pretty well, in my opinion.
I agree. Yeah.
Because further up the pitch on that left flank, at the beginning, he was playing Chilwell as a left winger who would literally just run in behind. Because when Chilwell was at his best for us as a wing back under Tuchel, he would just attack the space diagonally all the time. Because when we had that system under Tuchel, the wing backs, Reece James and Chilwell, had so much space and they were the spare man every time that he could just ghost in behind. So I think he kind of wanted to play on that. So that was something we did a little bit, and fans hated that because Chilwell was kind of out of favour in the fan base. At that point, that was another one that was just a bit of an eyesore that they latched onto. And then one of the main sticking points that came out after the season ended was he didn't like Enzo Fernandez and Moises Caicedo. Caicedo had just joined, and Enzo Fernandez had joined in January the season before as a pivot together. He felt like Enzo Fernandez wasn't good enough out of possession. He wasn't able to cover enough ground out of possession. He wasn't good enough defensively to play with as a deep midfielder next to Moises Caicedo. He also felt like they were too short. They weren't physical enough. So what ended up happening was we had Conor Gallagher playing in there, and Enzo Fernandez was further up the pitch. And then you get to probably the highlight of his time there, which was Cole Palmer was playing on the right, coming inside with Malo Gusto or Reece James occasionally, but Reece James spent a lot of that season injured, overlapping him. And obviously, a lot of Chelsea fans now think that Cole Palmer should keep playing there because he was so good in that position. He would come into the half space, he'd be on his left foot, he could create from that area, score from that area. And he also kind of had that, he was new, so it wasn't like everyone knew he was this good. For the first 6 months of the season, they were like, oh, this is just a guy they've signed. But he very quickly became the best player in the league. And it felt like last season that everyone started kind of double teaming him, allowing him less space, all of that stuff. And then you had Nicholas Jackson up front, who he scored 14 non-penalty goals in this season. So even though he missed a lot of chances, this was his best season he had. And I think that's a pretty good return for a striker that was recently playing on the wing for Villarreal, and we signed for like 35 million. And I think a lot of the best points tactically for Chelsea in that season was when they were playing direct. And you had players here that would do that. Raheem Sterling would often play sometimes on the left when Chilwell was injured. Gallagher was obviously pretty good in transition, had a lot of energy. Enzo Fernandez could create from that area of the pitch. wasn't really the box crasher that he is now then, but he still had that passing ability that he's always had. And Cole Palmer was just like, he was given so much space because no one knew how good he was at that point. So from an attacking perspective, it was a really fun team, I think, a lot of the time. There's a lot of really cool moments.
Quick question on Gallagher, because was it also him that then used Gallagher a bit more as a 10 towards the end?
Yeah, it kind of felt like he was doing a bit of both because, we had moments where Enzo Fernandez would go deeper, but it felt like Gallagher was that guy that would just fill in the gaps because you kind of want Caicedo and Enzo doing whatever they feel like they need to be doing.
And so I guess
Gallagher's just like that Swiss Army knife in the middle of midfield that would just like, because I remember this Liverpool I think we played Liverpool at Stamford Bridge. Gallagher was just on his own because I don't think we had Caicedo at that point, and Enzo Fernandez was kind of like, Poch was like, just get Enzo the ball, let Enzo go where he wants to go to try and create stuff. And Gallagher was just everywhere, just trying to cover ground. And he loves players like that. So Conor Gallagher could have a real big impact for Spurs if he comes in, because he kind of unlocked. He allows. He's the type of player, especially when he was at Chelsea and Poch was our coach. He allowed players like Caicedo and Fernandez and Palmer and Jackson to just do what they need to do at their best, instead of having this like really structured, rigid role like we had under Maresca and we still do kind of have under Rosinha to a lesser extent.
And that's one thing I really like about him as a coach. I think there's a couple of things you said there. I think one of the things I really like about him is exactly what you said earlier, is that he profiles players so well. He understands players' qualities and weaknesses, I think, better than any coach I've seen at Spurs. A few examples of this is, well, there's a weird little reverse where Moussa Dembele, who obviously is probably my favourite ever Spurs player, came to Spurs as a 10. Pochettino was the one that figured out that he should be deeper in midfield. And vice versa, Dele Alli came to Spurs as a DM / box-to-box midfielder, and he turned him into a second striker. And I think Pochettino is so good at that kind of thing. We used to kind of go on and on about his ability to turn fullbacks into world-class fullbacks. And this is a while ago, but we had Kyle Walker, Danny Rose, Ben Davies, and Kieran Trippier at the time, who were all pretty average, if not below average. And he turned... Well, Kyle Walker and Rose for one season were unbelievable. And then Trippier and Ben Davies also as understudies were really, really good. And I always thought that fullback position was so well stocked. Like, we've never had it that good in terms of depth and whatever. He figured out the partnership between Vertonghen and Alderweireld. There's so much good profiling that he did. He also had Eriksen kind of playing wide, but with Dele Alli being able to run beyond, he allowed Eriksen freedom. And that was the other thing that I really like about Pochettino, is that he does give players agency and the ability to make their own decisions and be free. And I think that's part of the reason that Cole Palmer really, really shone. And I do think the Premier League is moving in a direction where player freedom will become very important and useful to kind of try and unpick these really tight, structured, man-to-man-esque teams. And so those are some qualities, I think. Yeah, in terms of like the overall structure, like what was your two questions? What was your build up like, and what was your out of possession game like?
Oh God,
if you don't remember, fine. But like, yeah, because it's like what, 3 managers ago? No, two managers ago. Yeah,
yeah.
But the main I guess what were the main problems you think tactically that you faced? Was it the kind of end to endness of the games?
Yeah, for sure. I think, he was very reliant throughout the season on Thiago Silva, who was 39 in that season, I think. And the Chelsea fans love him, and I did. But in that final season, a lot of Chelsea fans wouldn't agree with this, but in that final season, I don't think Thiago Silva should have been starting for us. We didn't have great centre-backs outside of him, because Wesley Fofana was in the midst of just being permanently injured at this point. And we just bought Badiashile like 6 months before Pochettino joined, and Disasi was there. You just had, I think, some guys there that just weren't good in space. I think like Thiago Silva is a really standoffish centre-back. He doesn't really make many mistakes because he doesn't really engage unless he
Yeah.
knows he's going to get there.
Yeah.
He's like Thiago Silva is very similar to Van Dijk
Yeah.
in that respect, and that caused problems because Chelsea was so like that going forward,
You
so
need to
direct
back
that
up.
when you're coming back, it's like you have Thiago Silva and Disasi there, and it's just
Yeah.
you can't defend that space. So I think that was the reason why, and a lot of people, a lot of pro Poch guys in Chelsea's fan base would probably argue that if he had Van de Ven, for example, or
Even
I'm trying to
Romero, I mean, that's his type.
yeah, like centre backs that can defend space. Like
Yeah.
we kind of have some of them now. Like
Yeah.
I think Wesley Fofana's good in that respect.
Achampong.
Achampong's really good in that respect. Like if he had those types of players then, or they were a little bit better because we just bought some of them, they were still quite young, then maybe it could have worked a bit more. But unless you have sort of kind of game breaking centre backs that can cover space in the way that maybe Van de Ven can, so it could work at Spurs. That was the main issue, I think. But it was always like, I think he probably knew that Chelsea were going to concede a lot of goals. But he felt like Chelsea had the quality, especially against like teams lower down the league or teams that we had a better squad than to win those games, even if we conceded sort of 2 or 3 in the game. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean that all makes loads of sense, and I'm getting kind of painful but fun flashbacks to Ange, to be honest. Like this
Yeah.
is Ange-ish but less extreme, and also I think Ange was more set in the profiles that he wanted, especially out wide. I think Pochettino is someone that will make do with what he's got, which is why he survived so long at Spurs without pretty much any backing from the board. I mean, he went 18 months without a signing because he's so good at developing talent. And what's getting me excited as I speak about him is the amount of good young players at the club, not just the ones that have already broken through, but there's some unbelievable academy players coming through at Spurs right now. And the idea that you give someone like Pochettino that is really, really exciting. I think the concerns are definitely the injuries. I mean, we've had the worst injury crisis I've ever seen, and it's still going on. Odegaard just did his ACL today, so that's 6 months out for him. So it feels never ending, and if you bring him in, you need a massive squad. We won't have European football, which is probably a good starting point if he does come in.
Unless you win the Champions League.
Yes. Yeah, high ticket to the Champions League. No, I mean, all of that is very, very interesting. I get a little bit concerned with like what you said of the tactical level of the Premier League right now is so high. I think Pochettino is very built off a complete different style, which I actually quite like. The idea of not going down that trend route and trying something that's a bit against the grain and giving players more freedom, kind of building a collective belief. It's definitely something that will be different from a lot of what's going on in the Premier League right now. I think probably the best example of it at the moment is Iraola Bournemouth, but again, I think his is more kind of counter-attacking ish, but also high pressing, of course. But I think that is a similar appointment. I think Iraola's ability to develop players is really, really good as well. So I think that's a very good comparison to make. I think the injuries are concerned. The lack of tactical, I guess. I don't want to call it tactical intelligence, but he just doesn't prioritize like meticulous tactics, and he's never really. I've read a lot about him, even at Spurs, where he didn't really prepare for specific games. He just had a overall belief. It was a lot about motivation, which I think goes underappreciated a lot. I think tactics are only a small slice of what's important. I think motivation, especially with the where Spurs are right now, is massive. But I think there has to be some kind of ability to get the upper hand tactically.
I think, like, I was thinking about when you reached out to me yesterday to do this, I was thinking about Spurs, and then I actually watched Ange's Stick to Football thing this morning, and he kind of touched on it as well, whereby I think the problem at Spurs, if you go back to when Pochettino was last here, and you look at that list of managers the Spurs have had, you went from Poch to Jose to Nuno to Conte. It feels like every time Spurs lose a manager, they get asked whether they want to stick or twist, and they twist every time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the club hangs its hat on what the manager is. Whereas if you look at what, I'll use Chelsea as an example. I know I'll be the first one to tell you that I don't know whether the model is the way to go. But it's very clear what Chelsea are trying to do, right? It's like they want to sign young players on long contracts, and if the player doesn't work out, they can sell them for a decent amount
Or
of
if the manager,
accounting profit,
doesn't
break even.
work out.
Yeah, and if the manager doesn't work out, it's like when Maresca, when it kind of looked like he was going to go, and when he did go, before there was even any rumours about replacements, I knew it would be Rossini. And you can think that's good or bad from a Chelsea perspective, but like when it comes to Spurs, it's kind of like it feels like there needs to be like a set direction of travel for Spurs as a football club before they go to another manager. Because it's like you went from Poch, who was like the guy who got you to Champions League final second, and it's like, oh, how do we get over the line? It's like, oh, let's get the winner. The winner didn't work. Let's go for Nuno, who's kind of like Poch because he was further down the league and he did well. And then it's like you go to Conte because he's another winner, and then it's like you go to Ange because he's the hipster guy who's won in smaller leagues and he plays this nice football. And then that doesn't work. So then you go to like the more malleable, like high floor Frank, who turns out didn't actually have a high floor. And it kind of like it's very easy for me. It's very easy to go like you've tried every manager and it's not worked. It's a fucking club problem. Sorry, I didn't want to swear there, but like it feels like you need like a reset right now. Whether that's an interim that comes in towards the end of the season and Poch comes in, and the Spurs hierarchy, Benet and Johan Lange or whoever's making those decisions need to find a direction of travel for the Spurs. What do they want the coach to be? Because I looked at the list that Matt Law reported, and it's like De Zerbi, Pochettino, Robbie Keane. It's like De Zerbi and Poch are like this end and this end of the spectrum.
100%.
It's like it's like De Zerbi's like this shoddy man manager who tactically really nice, all that stuff. But it's like, you know, he apparently he's a bit of a not a great person. Poch is this, like the media loves him, the players love him. Like when he was at Chelsea, it was kind of like annoying at times. Like we were like, why is the media not criticizing him that much? But it's like, like Gary Neville goes on about him, how much he loves him. So like for me, it's like, and I think Manchester United are doing this right now with Carrick, where they're sitting back and they're going, right, we have a sporting structure now. What do we want the next coach to be? Do we want it to be Luis Enrique? Do we want it to be Kieran McKenna? Those are just names, but that needs to be the thing with Spurs, where it's like I just feel like there needs to be, because managers cannot work out, right? It can happen. There's so many variables that happen that lead to managers leaving. It can't just be results, right? It has to be the relationship, it has to work, and all that stuff. But you need to know, like, when that manager doesn't work, who can come in and be a similar thing? Because you can't twist every time. That's what Spurs do.
I mean, I've argued this so many times. I've said it's both player and manager recruitment don't mean really anything. At the major clubs, they continue to win regardless of the manager at the helm, the players that are in and out. You know, the likes of, and I know these are extreme examples, but the likes of Barcelona, Bayern Munich, even Dortmund, like they have a model. And the coach changes, obviously, because I think Dortmund are a pretty good relative similarity to where Spurs probably want to be. Like, we're never going to, well, at the moment, not going to be one of the top teams, but you can aim to be in Champions League places and whatever. Dortmund have always had a model. The coaches kind of change. They have similar coaches come in. Sometimes they promote them from kind of below. Sometimes they get them from the league. But it's a very consistent model. And when you bring in a manager, you should already be thinking about potential successors throughout their tenure. You should always be thinking about, and it doesn't mean that you tap up other managers or whatever. You just have a list of coaches that you constantly are interested in. Not like interested necessarily going to get them, but you're just keeping tabs on them that fit your consistent style. I don't understand how, but the issue is that people that run the club and make the decisions aren't football people. They don't understand that. They just want the next thing that's hot. Vinay and Langa supposedly are going to be leaving, which doesn't necessarily, I mean, I want them to go, but it doesn't necessarily fill me with confidence because the people making the decisions again are higher up businessmen who don't have a clue about what football is. And until that becomes synchronized and we have a top to bottom plan, we will continue to be chasing our tail about we want this manager. Oh no, we need to now let him get his players in. Oh, it's not worked. Okay, we need this manager now. We need to get his players in, and you just build like a mismatched squad. You build a lack of consistency, and that is the main problem. So regardless of who the coach is, you're right. It needs to be more about the plan, both in recruitment, style of play, style of recruitment. And you're right, Chelsea's kind of strategy can be criticized as much as you want, but at least there is a strategy, right? At least there's something that
Yeah.
you can look at and be like, this is what we are trying to do. Hopefully in time, not for me, hopefully for in your eyes, that is going to become successful and you will fight for titles again. But at least there's like, okay, we are starting in this place. We are going to do this year on year on year, and hopefully it's going to lead us to the top or wherever it is.
And,
And when you're just jumping around, it never becomes that.
and when you look at where we were when Poch, as I said before, we were in a similar place that you are now when Poch took us over. So because maybe Johan Lange and Vinay are leaving, if they're leaving, maybe you need another season to be like, what is this structure going to be? And it feels like Pochettino could be that guy that's there for a season, that keeps the spirits high, the fans know him, the players love him, all of that stuff. And you just take that season to just find out what they want Spurs to be moving forward, because you can't, like, the way they run the managerial sort of appointments at Spurs has been just incredibly reactive every time. It's like, if you just go back to the most recent change, Ange to Frank, it's like Ange was naive, didn't give a shit about set pieces, which is insane. And it's like, right, so what do we do now? Well, let's bring in a guy who adapts to the opposition
and loves set pieces
and yeah, like set pieces and has a high floor. And it's like when it goes all the way back to when Poch left the first time, and it's like, well, what's the issue with Poch? He's great, but he couldn't win.
Title. Yeah.
So let's bring in Mourinho because he's won. It's like there's no epicenter there of like what the ethos of the club is going forward, and the manager has to embody that. And it hasn't at Spurs, because every time it goes wrong with a coach, it's like, let's do the other thing.
Yeah.
But it's like the coach shouldn't dictate what it is, because the coach can dictate what it is if you're Arsenal or Man City, or when Klopp was at Liverpool, because like they've earned the right? But Spurs need to have an overarching model, and they need to find who fits into that, and the coach fits into that.
And there's plenty of coaches that can fit into a certain model that can be successful or not successful. But a lot of that, in the end, for me, comes down to player recruitment, because or when players develop at certain times, I think the coach is obviously important. And to maybe win titles, you need a very elite coach more often than not. But to kind of keep progressing, comes down to getting your recruitment right at the end of the day, and your planning right in my eyes. So I think, I could speak about this all day, but we'll be in another video. So I want to wrap it up, because I'm going to explore this further in other videos. But thanks so much for coming on. That's really insightful because I did kind of forget about what Pochettino was, because I haven't seen him in the Prem for a while, and obviously you watch Chelsea week in, week out, so really helpful to know. I think there's pros, there's cons. I didn't even get to speak about, which is one of the things that's irking me a little bit, is the way he's spoken about Trump and the political state in America, which is also difficult because he is the manager of the USA national team, but I don't really like his answers, and that's just like a personal thing that's irked me a little bit. But there's pros, there's cons. Pros to his football side of things, cons to his football side of things, pros to his off-pitch side of things, cons to that as well. I really understand fans longing for him. and I really get the attraction, but I think it isn't as risk free as a lot of fans are trying to say it is. So
Yeah,
that's
but
kind of what I want.
just to add to that, I know you want to wrap up, but fans are fickle. So in times of desperation, they want a familiar face that they have a bit of trust with. So that Spurs fans are not going to look entirely objectively about Pochettino and whether his football works now because he left 5-6 years ago now. But that's just the way it goes. So you can't really blame them for thinking
No,
like
and
that.
I just
Yeah,
fans can think what they want. I hope that our leadership are more thoughtful than just following what fans think, because
yeah,
these are meant to be professionals. Not that that means don't hire Pochettino, but it means
sure.
do the right processes. Make
Hmm.
sure this appointment is right, and that means looking at other candidates, not just being like Pochettino. The fans want him. It will take the pressure off us. Just get Pochettino.
Yeah,
But yeah, thanks for watching. Please do go check out Tom. Even though he is a Chelsea fan, he provides very, very good analysis. It's always insightful for me. Obviously, I don't watch Chelsea all the time, but I'm interested in a lot of their players. So, very, very good analysis. So, I will leave that in the description. Make sure you're subscribed, and hopefully, we'll have this managerial search wrapped up by next week for the North London derby. Thanks for watching, and come on, you Spurs.